So here is my second symbol. Are you ready? I want to talk about the crown of thorns. You say, what do you mean crown of thorns? That was a mockery. Here's your king. Jews, here's your king. You know, Pilate had a problem with these Jewish people. They were a little bit rebellious, you know. And he didn't like anybody, you know, having an insurrection to work against Pax Romana, the glory and power of Rome. And these Jewish people irritated him. And he said, listen, I find no fault with this man. He was the sinless son. He was the without blemish, the Lamb of God. But you know what? They said, he claimed to be king. Crucify him. We have no king but Caesar. So Pilate actually mocked him. Herod actually, who wanted to be king, thrust a crown, are you ready, of thorns that pierced his brow. What sacrifice? The blood literally goes out of his brow when he suffered and died. Not just died, he suffered and died. Let me add to that. His suffering was not for what he did. Are you ready? This is love. There is no greater love. He was our sacrifice, but are you ready? He was our substitute. He took our place. Think of you being Barabbas. You should have died. That was your cross. But Jesus bore your cross. He died our death. He suffered the shame, the guilt, the mockery that we should have. That is no greater love. That sacrificial love embodied in Jesus. Nobody took his life from him. He said to Pilate, I have the power to lay down my life and I have the power to take it up again. You see what he did? He willingly gave his. No, that is no greater love than someone lay down his life for us. Yes, he was lifted up. Can you see that? The cross lifted up with a crown of thorns. He died, King of the Jews. But what Pilate wrote, and he said, what I've written, I'm not going to take that back. But the irony of that is that Jesus was born a king. You remember the wise men came? Where is he who was born King of the Jews? Pilate himself said, are you a king? He said, that's what you say. They put a plaque, King of Kings, King of the Jews. And you know what? If you're listening to me, the cross wasn't the end, because you and I know the end of the story is the resurrection. Jesus is coming again. You know how? As King of Kings and Lord of Lords. King on a cross, lifted up to die. But his crucifixion was actually his coronation. God declared him to be his king. Is Jesus your king? Is he Lord of your life? I think it's so important that we understand sacrifice not as an end to itself, but as our substitute. This greater love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. As 1 Corinthians 13 and verse 7 says, and that is the love that is no greater love. A story comes to my mind very quickly of an African chief, and he had this little place where he had eggs and a hen would lay eggs, but every time he went there to get the eggs, the eggs would disappear. He got so mad, he says, who's robbing my eggs? I'm the king, I'm the chief. And all the tribal people, we didn't do that, chief. He said, who's doing this? He said, if I find out who took that, I'm going to punish them like I do. Publicly put them on the pole and whip them. Nobody came up. He said, I want to find out who this thief is. The irony. Who was taking the chief's eggs, the African chief's eggs? Early in the morning, before he could get up, actually it was his mom who was coming in and taking those eggs. Now what's he going to do? You know what the king and chief did? He had to pay the punishment. He tied himself to that pole and he took the whipping for his mom. When I heard that story, I thought, this is love. I've heard of mother's love, but no greater love is there when we show that sacrifice for others whom we love. He loved us, gave himself for us. There is no sacrifice greater than we give ourselves to him. Well, let me finish. We've looked at the lamb, the Passover lamb, for physical sacrifice. We've looked at the crown of thorns for the emotional pain and shame that Jesus bore for us as our substitute.